Hello, this is Rico Cavella, and this is your Fearless Aging Podcast. And the title of this episode is Sugar Addiction, which is a hot topic these days, and there's so many people that are dealing with this. So this is an important topic that we need to get into. And we're very fortunate today. We have a great guest. His name is Michael Collins, and he's the author of The Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide and of the website sugaraddiction.com. So Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the work you're doing out there. It's great. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So I always like to begin with all my guests, tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us about your journey, how you came to do what you do today.
Yeah, I've got a short kind of a podcast version, basically. I grew up, I think, like a lot of us as a regular kid. My mom was a sugar junkie, and she really loved her sugar. She had a stash, and we knew where it was, and we had literally unfettered access to the sugar bowl. Mm-hmm. And we made Kool-Aid with 3 times the recipe. we made bread and butter and sugar sandwiches. It was just and any kind of candy, cakes, cookies, whatever. We had it all. And I didn't realize that it was changing my state at the time. I didn't realize that it was giving me a little boost of dopamine, which the science that we'll talk about a little bit later. But that was, no one knew anything about that. So my mom genuinely believed sugar was love. Okay, that's how she grew up. Her mom died at 8 years old, and they made an arrangement that her relatives owned the store across the street, that when she walked in, they could put it on their account, and she could just have anything she wanted. Mm-hmm. And it was a great thing for someone just lost their mom at 8, but it was not such a good thing for a child to get acclimated, and she just never could beat the addiction over the years. So fast forward, I run into beer and alcohol about 14 or 15, and I realized that, this stuff really changes my state. I can talk to girls, whatever. And, I got sober at 28. It's a long story. It's probably another podcast, but I'm open if you want to talk about it. But then I went right back to the sugar. And I see this a lot of my fellow recovering folks, right? They go right back to the sugar. They gain a lot of weight, get bad diabetes diagnosis and stuff, but they just substitute another drug, another drug. I didn't really use much sugar when I was drinking and drugging, but, afterwards I ended up figuring out that, man, I went right back to that sugar. I mean, it was just overwhelming. 6 or 8 Mountain Dews, full sugar, full caffeine a day.
Well, also alcohol is sugar. Also turns to sugar too. So
exactly,
it is still. Yeah.
We know that. I know that now. But,
yeah.
I didn't know it then.
yeah.
And then I just somehow I talked my wife at the time into having 2 children. I had twins and talked her into a sugar-free pregnancy. And they didn't have sugar, flour, or caffeine until they were 6 years old. It was really a fight back then, this over 30 years ago. And we fought with the schools and the grandparents. Everybody thought we were depriving them or something. They weren't, and they don't feel deprived. And the experiment worked, both physically and mentally. These guys are Adonises, Greek gods kind of thing.
Well, Michael, let me ask you, way back 30 years ago, how did you learn that sugar was the problem? How did you know that?
Good question. Yeah, I left that part of the story out. It's a good catch. But so I read this book called Sugar Blues, and Sugar Blues was written by a guy named William Duffy. And Duffy was at a party one time, and he's putting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and from behind him, a voice says, "I wouldn't have that stuff in my house, let alone my body." And it was Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star.
Really?
And she was older at the time, and they got married, and they traveled the country promoting that book in the 80s, actually late 70s, and it was redone in the 80s. And so it became, kind of a classic back then, and a lot of people read it, but, not much changed. The food industry kind of took over when the tobacco industry started to buy up all the assets. Right. After their after their falling out and stuff. So, yeah, it was, I just was fascinated by it, and I was trying to be healthy, after getting sober and stuff. So I just kept after it. I had a regular life, regular career, whatever. It wasn't in wellness or health or anything. And about 10 years ago, I decided, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And my kids had always said, because, they were obviously grew up this way, you should write a book on sugar, sugar addiction. So I did. And here we are. And I've got the domain, the website, and we provide, it's just been what I've been doing for the last full time now, about 3 years.
Yeah. Well, you know what stands out to me is, I think that our listeners, I want you to know, is that, so sometimes a book, as you said, can just change your life, so books are really important. When you discovered that Sugar Blues book, that really resonated with you, and it changed your whole life and put you on this path to not only help yourself and your family, but other people. So that's so good. And anytime you write a book, especially when it has to do with wellness, I think it really is, something of labor of love, and a great value that can really change other people's lives. So, yeah. Thank you for that. So, well, let's get into it now. So, how do you define? How does a person know if they're really addicted to sugar? And then we'll talk about some of the harm that it does.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The thing that's a little bit of a stickler really is that, sugar addiction is not named in what's called the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Manual of Symptoms, and for people that can get insurance. So, but when you look at addiction, and that is in the book, you can see that sugar has all of the ingredients of tolerance and physical damage, and there's 5 or 6 of them, whatever. And if people could spend 5 minutes in my inbox or 5 minutes on my email or whatever, they would realize there's so much pain out there. Thousands, literally tens of thousands now, of people have written me and messaged me about losing limbs, going blind. They're over 200-300 pounds overweight, and the doctor said you're going to die, and they still can't quit sugar. So to me, that's the definition of addiction, and seeing this side of it. And one of the things I always tell people, I have a little quiz on the website to see if you might be addicted to sugar. And I say, if you make your way to Google, and then you make your way to sugaraddiction.com, and you take the test, you probably don't need to take the test because you already know. Most people know deep down, when they're hiding their kids' candy, when they're going to 2 different 7-Elevens so that the clerk doesn't know, they're eating in the car, they're eating it on the way home and throwing the papers and the wrappers away. People know in their heart whether or not that sugar is an issue. And trying to quit, the part that's real, so very real, is we run detoxes all the time. Literally, it's part of what we do. Days 3 through 5, if you were to quit sugar and caffeine and flour at the same time, you would be and will be incapacitated. You will have headaches, lethargy, you'll be starving, you won't be able to get out of bed. And to be honest, this is a proven fact. This is a peer-reviewed wellness diet fact that when someone loses an excess amount of weight from cutting back on carbs, white processed carbs, flour and sugar, they 95+% gain it all back in the first year. And that really, in our work, is just proof in the pudding that people they really haven't beaten their addiction. They white knuckled it for a little bit, and then they finally came back to realize that they're addicted to sugar. So it's a tough question until we get it named a true disorder, but it's very real.
Yeah, I know some of the latest scientific studies have found that sugar is actually more addictive than heroin.
Yeah,
it's truly addictive thing, and I think the real problem is as you mentioned also with the tobacco industry and the big pharmas and big agribusiness and big food things. They don't produce any products that are for our health. They produce things that are cheap and they can make a lot of money on it. And it's really the refined processed sugars and a bunch of that's in everything that's really the problem. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the harm that you realize. You mentioned it briefly, but not in addition to gaining excess body fat and diabetes, and I've also heard that I've heard people say that if we got people, first of all, children off sugar, all this ADD and all this hyperactivity for children would go away. And also I heard someone, I don't remember now who it was, but they said we could probably get half the people out of the mental institutions as well if we got them off of sugar.
I believe both things are 100% true.
Yeah.
The fastest growing thing we're doing is Sugar-Free Kids on Facebook. There's a great doc here in Los Angeles, works at UCLA, coming out with a book in October, November, called Sugar Proof, Sugar-Proofing Your Kids, and all the maladies behind it. For the first time in history, the American Dental Association, the American Pediatric Dental Association, the American Association of Pediatrics, and another medical association came together. They never cooperated ever in a statement with the Robert Wood Johnson Association, which is one of the largest nonprofits in the world. And they said children between 0 and 5 should have zero, not a little, not just some, zero sugar sweetened beverages. That's no fruit juice and no sodas. Mm-hmm. And again, the medical associations never cooperated in that way, but it's becoming scientifically evident. And you talked about the, being more addictive than heroin, cocaine, that kind of stuff. It literally lights up the same brain chemicals, the brain reward systems in your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, even your adrenals are affected by this drug. And they show it in MRIs, and food scientists use MRIs in giant campus-like labs to create products that create that light up in the MRI, right? So you've got this kind of nefarious used to be tobacco owners creating these addictive products. And it's just, this is dose dependent, Rico. Look, we take a little heroin, we take a little cocaine, we take a little alcohol, but we're pounding on average 17 to 20 teaspoons a day of this stuff. Yeah. All day, every day since we were children. Yeah. And people that are way overweight, they're doing 30, 40 teaspoons a day of sugar, and teenagers as well. Wow. So it's like you're never off the stuff. You're never literally manually manipulating your dopamine, serotonin receptors, right? You're just playing with your brain, for goodness sakes. It's a tough situation. And one that's not well known in society, really. I mean, people just don't think about it, to be honest.
Right. I wanted to add too, talking about, again, it came out several years ago that, the big food manufacturers, all the processed junk food that's out there, that it came out that their food scientists, they came up with this thing they call the optimizer. And they figured out the optimum amount of fried fat, sugar, and salt that actually does get you addictive. So that, the food manufacturers are no better than the tobacco companies, and the same with the big pharmaceutical companies. But people like you and we're always trying to get more and more of this information so people realize what's going on, and so they need to take responsibility for their health. And I think it is. There's a big shift coming. I think more and more people are realizing, and even this COVID virus situation that we're in now, I think some of the good things hopefully will come about it, that people will realize how much important their health is, and they better start taking better care of their health, because it's really just the people that are being affected that really have a depressed immune system. And then of course that's one thing that sugar does as well, is depress your immune system.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they've come out with metabolic syndrome, diabetes, obesity. These are main contributors to COVID deaths. I mean, they're starting to say that basically the things that sugar causes are the things that, if people have a bad history with, they're going to have a harder time with the COVID. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk just a little bit about why this has become such a big problem. In addition to, because we mentioned about the food manufacturers, they put it out there, but I think we need to, again, let people realize that that we've gotten so out of balance in so many of our life, of the lifestyle that we live now. We got into this rush society that we have to accomplish so much, and that's why people just want to eat some fast food, they eat something quick, and they don't really pay attention to what they're doing, you know, because we got so caught up into the money game, you know, that all we got to do is hustle and work hard and make all this money. And you know, as you probably heard this in our holistic field, we have the saying that so many people uh, spend their health to build their wealth, and then you got to try and spend your wealth to build back your health. So this is a systemic problem in our society. That so talk a little bit about what you think about that. You know, how this is happening and what we need to do to just change our overall mindset about how we're taking care of our physical body.
Yeah, no, this is kind of one of my favorite topics. As a matter of fact, when I did read Sugar Blues, I was so fascinated by the story of the growth of the English Empire. Back in the day, they would go from England, pick up empty boats, go pick up slaves in Africa, go to South America or the Caribbean, excuse me, and South America, and you know, the United States, pick up sugar, rum, molasses, and bring it back. And they grew something bigger than El Chapo ever dreamed of growing, right? It was a huge drug empire
Yeah.
run on the backs. And people went literally from 5 pounds a year to 100 pounds a year in one generation. And I always like to study how we got here to see how we're going to get out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the evolution of sugar into the diet, this is before the 1980s even. It got really bad in the 1980s when high fructose corn syrup came into the diet.
Yeah.
And you can look at the numbers; they run parallel, straight up and to the right on a graph. That the growth of high fructose corn syrup in our food system and the obesity numbers from the 80s to now, and it just keeps going up because they keep inventing the stuff as we have been talking about. So you look at how we got in when literally everything from birth to death, every celebration, every funeral, marriage, anything you can think of, holidays are now in, like Valentine's and Halloween, and everything is now some kind of gigantic sugar binge, right? And we all grew up in this, and no one knows a world without it, okay? So here we've arrived at this place. So how do we get out? Well, this is a tectonic shift. This is a societal tectonic shift, like condoms in bathrooms, smoking in public, drinking and driving, seatbelts in cars, where science says, look, this is what's happening. This is the reality of what's happening when you drink and drive. This is what reality is when you crash a car and you don't have a seatbelt. Try and get in a seatbelt right now with a 10-year-old. You know what they're going to say? Rico, put your seatbelt on. They're only 10. They know now, right? And this tectonic shift is necessary. We're only about 5 or 6 years in, 10 years in to this shift. And the Coca-Cola's sales are down 25% this year because of COVID and a lot of reasons. But they've been going down for the last 3 years. It's happening, but it's just very slow, and it's going to take a while to get us to the other side. And the more shows like this that happen and more people get aware, then the more people are going to know. People don't want their kids to have their problems. They say to me all the time, man, they say, I just don't want to pass this on to my kids, because they're willing at that point not to lie to themselves, right? I'm sure you've seen this, like, not like the next day, not like the next week, a woman with an alcohol issue or not with an alcohol issue or a smoking issue, they will quit smoking, they will quit drinking the hour the doctor tells them that was the last cigarette and the last drink they had during that pregnancy. Now they may start again, but at least they understand that, And so that's got this kind of ethos, this kind of understanding, this kind of acceptance of this powerful psychoactive body destroying drug is going to need to work its way into society with science. Science is what we stand on. I stand on the shoulder of giants. I'm just a guy who translates it to a little bit easier way for the public to assimilate than university studies, right? And so, you know, once we keep getting that out and society keeps changing, and people tell the stories of losing 100, 200 pounds, and the only thing they did was get off the sugar, then, you know, it starts to change. So that's where I think
Yeah.
the whole thing happens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really well said, Michael. I just want to add, yeah, it's not good. You know, it's what I tell people. You know, it's all about. You mentioned about the family thing and children. That's really where it's at because, you know, when you know working with so many people all these years myself. You know, as a personal trainer and a health coach and fitness client, fit with fitness clients, and when they have the goal to lose weight, I tell them that's not going to work. You got to drill down. Why do you really want to get healthier? Why do you want to give up sugar? Why do you want to, you know, reduce your body fat and get healthier? It's really when you drill down, it has to be connected to what's really truly valuable, important to you. And that's your family. You want to be around to take care of your family. You want to be a good role model for your children. So that's where people have to realize it's not about, you know, it's not about superficial things or cosmetic things. It's really about your life and how you present yourself with your family. And so I think that's a really important point to get out, and that's really good. The other thing I wanted to mention was what you were talking about. We really, the big problem is our governments as well. You know how they're solely controlled by the big corporations and by the money, and our government subsidizes corn. They actually subsidize it. And so it's our government is actually helping these manufacturers to produce all this high fructose corn syrup and all these products that are actually, you know, killing people. So it's got to be a big awakening, and we've got to get more people aware of health and what's really going on as government people. So we need some younger, newer, progressive people in there that understand all these things, and that's when we'll get some major change coming.
I agree. I agree.
So tell us a little bit about your book. What are some of the key things that people will learn in your book, and do you give in your book? Do you have a guide to how to detox yourself from sugar?
I do. I named it The Last Resort Sugar Detox because after working with folks for a while, I realized we took an average, it was 6.8. People had done 6.8 different programs, Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, you know, anything you can, you know, there's all kind of online diets and what have you. And they'd done like almost some of them as many as 10 or more different ways to lose weight or, you know, to detox from the white stuff. And people call it the carbs, the ultra processed carbs and sugar. And they just had, you know, limited success. Some, I mean, they'd make it for 5 or 10 days or whatever. And so, you know, we specialize kind of in the tough cases, and we want folks that have, you know, had that experience. We don't have time to, you know, convince them that this is what they need to do. When they arrive at our doorstep, they're ready. So the book really kind of outlines my story, my kids' story, and some stories of some other folks who've had a lot of success with us. And realizing that it's very similar to drug addiction in that you have to understand, this is one of the most important things, that it's a little deep. I don't, you know, but I think that people, if you've ever talked to someone who has maintained an flour and sugar abstinence over a time period, is they have to go through some of the same emotional management rehab, if you will. We call it brain rehab. Because since you were a child, your brain, your reward system, your nucleus accumbens has been manually manipulated by this drug. When you're worried, you have worry, you think sugar. When you're stressed, you have sugar. You know, when you're scared, you have sugar, right? And you have to literally develop a new habit. You have to go for a walk, go for a run, walk the dog, go to yoga, get a manicure, get a pedicure, get a massage, some other self-care process that doesn't include eating. Because look, we can just reach for something on the couch and be satiated and get a little dopamine squirt, right? We get a little hit and feel a little bit better. But that, like any drug, only lasts 5 or 10, 20 minutes, right? And you got to have more. That's that big more, right? More, more, more. And so, you know, we just teach you know, because of my recovery, you know, my addiction recovery background, it's different than 95% of the quote unquote sugar educators out there. Most of them health folks who are probably in the 1/3 of human beings, like the group of people who can have one drink and walk away. These folks probably never really had a sugar addiction. They were athletes or what, it doesn't really even matter physically, but they just don't, their body doesn't react the same way. Well, as you can tell, and it matches the mirrors, the obesity numbers, 1/3 to possibly 2/3, but a solid 1/3 of people, when they ingest this substance, they get a biochemical reaction in their brain that signals for more. They want more dopamine, they want more serotonin, they want to play with, and they don't really realize it because it literally probably started in the womb. I mean, it started that many years ago with this slight feeling. And at this point, by the time we get to be adults, you're not trying to get a buzz like the kids at the birthday party. You are just trying to get back to normal. And you don't have time in your schedule, your kids, your work, in a meeting. You can't go through withdrawals. Withdrawals are tough. You've got to be focused for 30 straight days and really realize it. And so we kind of explain the whole process. We walk you through it, what to eat. You know, most people, Rico, they just want a food plan and an exercise plan. They think this is some kind of boot camp. I'm here to tell you, you don't even need exercise at all to lose weight. Happens perfectly normally, perfectly naturally. Walk into the car, chasing the kids around will be enough. Yes, working out will help you restore your brain chemicals quicker, hydrating well, good nourishment, you know, good food, good diet, whole foods will help that process quicker. But exercise alone, you can't outrun a bad diet.
Right.
So we just show you how to, you know, we walk you through the whole process. We give you the foods, we give you the recipes, we give you all that stuff. But I'll tell you one thing, this is important. I did that for 7 years at sugaraddiction.com. I gave the best information on the internet. I'm not kidding you, about food and diet and everything. And until we started doing communities online, until we started people finally not feeling alone, is when the skyrocketing success happened. You know, a few people would read the book and understand it back then, or read some of the information, understand it back then. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago when we started really gathering together these people in forums and Zoom meetings like this and whatever, that they start to understand that they can't do this alone. Probably in their household, their spouse and their kids or whoever, they're not going to be on board. And they're going to be at a different place in their life. And if you don't get fellows travelers on board with you, or, you know, that you can reach out to and say, I'm losing my mind. It's day 5. I think I really need to go get some, a pill from a doctor, you know, like, chill, man. You know, you need somebody to be able to kind of walk you through it. And that's when we started having the success. But yeah, the book's a solid guide, but there's more to it. There really is.
Yeah, that's so well said. It's really, it starts with your mindset. You've got to be able to change your mindset about your life and what's important and what you need to do. And it's a complex subject, but I really thank you for your good work, because it's something. Well,
you said this twice, and I failed to jump in the first time, but you are 110% right about what we call your big why. Mm-hmm. If you can't see clearly and write it down and see it every day and know that the life you're leaving is better than the life you're going to, is worse than the life that you're going to, and you can't feel yourself at a right-sized body, you can't feel yourself swimming with the kids, you can't feel yourself going to the doctor and saying you can get off the diabetes meds now. You can't feel that, you can't get there, or see it and feel it. So that big why is so important.
Really well said again, Michael. Well, you actually answered my last question. You know, I always ask everybody when we're talking about some things that can be really valuable, especially, you know, with your health. So I always say, well, what ideas do you have to get people to actually take action on your recommendations? And I think you just mentioned it, but if you have anything else you want to say.
Yeah, no, the big why is a big one for sure. If you're, you know, if you don't take anything away from it, take this, you know, read some books about, you know, your why. But one thing I did find that's kind of interesting, your folks might like, and it's a little bit of a threat. I'm starting to realize it's a little bit of a threat, a challenge, whatever, is that the folks who get success, they're kind of rebels anyway. Because this is like societally a little different. They're kind of the pioneers in their own life. Maybe the first one to go to college, first one to be a big athlete, first one to whatever, like get married. I don't know, a lot of different firsts that we run across are kind of pioneers in general, right? Because it takes, at this point in history, a little bit of that pioneering spirit. And, I just found that in our research and talking to the folks, but and the folks who think of themselves as pioneers, who have had those, maybe first one to go to college, some kind of success like that, they kind of like that little, place in their family or their place in their background. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's really about, it's what being aware and awakening is all about. It's really of learning about what our life is really all about, and that we are here with a unique body and a unique purpose to really do something of value and make a difference in the world. And we need to be healthy, and we need to have a healthy, energetic body and live much longer than we are today. And so the more people, when you realize that you are here with a purpose. And so I think that's a big help in realizing that you want to take the very best care of your physical body as you can, because it's your vehicle to do what you're meant to do here. And again, when you tie it into the family, I think that's a big thing. So it's a great message that you have, and you're doing really a lot of good, Michael. And so you want to get Michael's book or learn more about his coaching programs, so just go to sugaraddiction.com and you can get all that information from you. So Michael, I really appreciate you being here. That was some really great information. And again, I want to thank you for your work too, because that's such a big problem these days. And so your work is really valuable. And so thank you again for that.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work. I mean, I wanted to ask you a few questions about your healthy at any age. I mean, you got heroes. Was Jack LaLanne a hero, or you got?
Yeah, I can. Well, yeah, I'll tell you about that. We got a few more minutes here. We can go. I actually met Jack LaLanne. The way I met him was there was a company called Fitness Age back in the 90s, and what it was, they developed this basic fitness test, just about 5 different things, and they put them all on computer, because they had all this data from the YMCA used to test people way back in the early days, like how many push-ups and sit-ups and how can you reach your toes, and then step tests and a body fat thing, how much your body fat was. So they had all this data, and they had it by different ages. So when the computer age came about, they put together all by computer, so they could actually test someone and then plug it in the computer, and it would come up with an age. In other words, if you were 40 and you took the test and your fitness age came out to be 50, then it was a good motivation to say, look, you better get going. So they were going to make these kiosks in all the gyms around the United States. But the problem was, I don't know, I think they just got in over their head and they spent too much money, and I don't know, they just never got it together. But anyway, they hired Jack LaLanne to be their main spokesperson. And they were based here in San Diego, and I happened to meet the CEO, and he hired me to train their staff of people there. They had a big facility here in San Diego. So that's how I knew him. And so at some of the events to promote their product, Jack would be there and I'd be there, so we'd hang out a little bit. And Jack LaLanne was really an amazing person. 2 things about Jack was, one of them was, how he did all these feats, this crazy stuff he did.
Yeah.
And the craziest one was he actually pulled a rowboat handcuffed, a whole bunch of rowboats handcuffed in Alcatraz Channel, which is like freezing water.
I know.
And so I say, Jack, how could you do something? Why did you do it? Obviously, it was a good promotion. It got him to be famous, but how could you do that? You know what he told me? He said, every day for like 3 months before that, I'd fill up my bathtub full of ice, and I'd lay on a bed of ice for an hour or 2 hours just to get myself, be able to withstand that freezing cold. I mean, that is just insane. Although, you know what, now all this new things about biohacking and extending your life, you know, doing cryogenics and coldness is something that's supposedly to help you. But I mean, some things we go to such extremes. I don't think, even if it gave you another 6 months, but going through all that torture of freezing yourself, that's just kind of silly. And then the other thing about Jack LaLanne was funny. He had the same, that exercise is king and nutrition is queen. And I used to say, Jack, no, that you actually got it backwards. Of course, you know, he wouldn't go for it. I said, if you exercise really well all the time, you can have a fit, good looking body. But if you don't get good nutrition, you're going to lose your health and you're going to be unhealthy. But if you have really good nutrition and you eat really healthy, you're probably going to be pretty healthy. You may not be very fit, and you're not going to be as strong or look as good as you could, but you can still be healthy without exercising. And so that was the story I always have to say that. But he was into exercise is king and nutrition is queen. And
I agree with you, actually.
No, and just like especially for weight loss, or well, I don't even call it weight loss. You know, reducing body fat. It's what you put in your mouth is the most important thing. Nutrition is the most. Exercise has some benefit, but it's really about the food. Absolutely right.
Cool. You know, Jack has a show about sugar. It's an entire one of his old shows about sugar. It's really good. I mean, we're talking in the 50s, right? And it's like, I must have seen it as a kid because I remember watching it. But yeah.
No, he was a brilliant guy in many ways. There's no question. Oh, one more thing I have to say, because I actually stole this from him. Because one time, I think he died, he was around 95, 96.
95,
but
yeah.
I think when he was around 90, they were interviewing him. Somebody was interviewing him and he says, Jack, I hear that you still exercise 2 hours every day. You must really love to exercise. And he says, no, I hate it. No, I don't. He goes, you hate it? Well, then why do you do it? And you know what his answer was? Because I'm Jack LaLanne.
He said, if I die, it'll ruin my reputation.
That's right. So, but still, that's kind of my thing too. You know, I mean, if somebody asks me, you know, why do you do what you do? Because I'm Mr. Ageless Living. So well, it's kind of true. If you got to walk your talk. You know, if you that you can stay healthy and fit and energetic all of your life, then you gotta do it. You know, sometimes I don't feel like doing some things either, but I got to do it because that's my thing. You know.
100%. People always tempted me with the sugar. I still haven't had any in 30 years. So.
Oh, that's pretty good. I am fortunate, you know, that because I have always been exercised and been pretty healthy and do a lot of things. Well, the only sweeter thing I eat, you know, I like organic raw honey. I think that has some benefits, and I eat a little bit of that, but that's about it. Yeah.
Cool.
That's about it. Well, Michael, thank you again so much. Again, thank you for your work. You're doing a great service, and so thanks for being here. That was really great. And so I just remind our audience that if you like these Fearless Aging podcast, you know, subscribe to our channel, leave us a review, and tell your friends to tune in. You can find us on iTunes and all the major places where you can find podcasts. So thanks very much for being here. And remember, the whole thing is you got to take responsibility for your health. You got to go out and make it happen, and you can. Michael's a good example of that. I'm an example of that. You can do it. So just go out and do it.
All righty.